They do say you become the average of the 5 people that you most closely associate with. Well, today I have one of those people with me. Welcome, Jim.
I like the concept of average of the 5. And I think also the other thing that reminds me of is that concept of being around people that push you to get better.
Exactly.
And I don't mean literally they push you, but when I observe you and there's a few other people in our network, you know, I always see the high end of performance, which has always triggered me to try and get better at what I do.
Well,
right?
For the listener, just for reference point here, Jim and I first met when we came together with a couple of other guys back in 1994. So next year will be our 30th year, believe it or not, actually working together. And at that time, we were part of promoting Tony Robbins, if you remember right, back at that time. Robbins Research, UK.
Yeah, him and a few other speakers from the US typically.
Yeah, so we started that business, and there was a dear friend of ours, Colin Hiles. We're affectionately known as the Three Amigos.
Take it.
And we're still working together, albeit in different paths slightly.
Yeah.
But
I think it is different, and we've all gone in our own direction to a point. But if you had a Venn diagram right in the middle, there are some consistencies. There are some similarities around curiosity, around being interested in change and performance and these sort of topics.
I think that's one of the key things that when we first started, all of us had come from sort of fairly humble beginnings, and we'd all embarked upon a journey of self-education.
Right.
We've all read numerous books, been to numerous courses, have all been passionate learners. And actually think about it, here we are 30 years later, and it's actually no different.
Yeah, no, indeed. And I think we also have there's a consistency in our interest in topics where we can extract ideas that actually get a result. We're curious, we're interested, but I think we're ultimately interested in what to do with information, and how to prioritize. That's a good strategy. Let's deploy that one. It has to show up.
Absolutely. Some of you would have heard this before in our earlier podcast, that we started a business called Speakers International, became later the SI Group, later became Rogan SI. And that's really where our sort of professional career began. And we built a fairly decent sized consultancy there. And then about 10 years ago, you and I, and then later Colin, we followed our own paths.
Right.
But we've always retained some sort of working relationship together.
Yeah, I mean, it genuinely, even though we've gone through a number of iterations of working together, my schedule hasn't changed for 30 years, right? I still work with you a few times a month and with Colin occasionally and do my own thing. So
absolutely.
Life, there's been a consistency in what life's felt like with that network, which has been fantastic, by the way.
But the one standout thing that has definitely happened, with the focus on you for a moment, in the last 3 to 4 years, something that's actually eluded me thus far, and that is writing a book.
Yeah.
And that is something you have accomplished, and it's been amazing.
Yeah, it was. It has been.
It's been an amazing journey, Jim. I mean, it really has.
No, it has. And it was an unlikely challenge to take on.
Can I just stop you there? I mean, we worked together for a long time. You're not a person known for your detail.
No.
When it comes to...
No, I think every psychometric test will tell you I'm on the creative, pioneer, chaotic end of the scale.
Me too.
And I've always valued the idea of... We remember learning this from our good friends back in the day, the Templeton brothers, where they'd say... They were in education, we were in business, and they went, you got to make a mess and then tidy up.
Yeah, make a mess, tidy up, and
I've always thought that with my thinking. I'm very good around chaos and coming at things from angles. But to write a book, the discipline then becomes, well, can you then put it down into some systems of thinking where people can process it outside of your preference? That was challenging. And to really dig into the content that I was interested in, and put it across in a way that was logical, that made sense, and still had an element of, my personality or some flavor of my style of how I operate. I wanted that. That was important to me too. So, no, it was far and away, although we had a lot of challenges over the years, right? it was far and away the most challenging single task that I took on.
Hence the reason it's eluded me. I mean, we had one written together.
Sure.
With Colin, Breakthrough to Peak Performance, based on the program we all developed together. And that was many years ago, but we had someone helping us write that. Whereas actually, going out and, nailing that project is and it has been fantastic, and we're going to talk a little bit about it today.
Yeah, good.
The listeners of our podcast will know us for talking about practical strategies.
Yeah.
That's what the promise of this podcast is about. When somebody finishes listening to this podcast, they'll have some practical ideas they can actually take away and go and apply. And I know we come from a similar school there when it comes to personal development. Do you want to talk about your approach?
Yeah. And it's reflected in the book. I wanted to, you'll see in the book, I talk about high performance, about well-being, and trying to tie these things together. But I also talk about coming up with hacks. And when I say hack, I don't like the word hack because it infers it's a shortcut, that it's easy. High performance in anything is not easy. It's hard. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes resilience, discipline. However, within that, there are some tools, tips, and tricks that just work, based on rigorous science and neuroscience, and I wanted to find those out that I needed. It wasn't just that I was saying, this is what I've always done, I'm now going to share it in a book. When I was writing the book, I was the project as much as anybody else. I was the lab rat, testing ideas and things I was learning and trying to find out if they work for me as well as the person that's going to read the book, right? So practical application is everything.
It's almost irritating to us, isn't it, to either listen to us speak or read a book. They'll say things like, how do you do this or how do you do that? It's interesting to talk about this, but they don't actually get to the point where you have something you can take away, you can actually use.
It's interesting to hear someone's concept and someone's story, right? But there comes a point where you got to go, okay. Now, sometimes they leave you to join the dots, and you got to work out, how do I apply that? Like you, I'm much more of the mind to say, here are the how-tos and how it shows up in life and how I've seen it show up in life and how others have found they can use this idea. And that's not easy. It's not easy to articulate because everyone's individual. Everyone's got their own personal journey through information, and how I might apply something may be different to the next person. So it's not easy to answer that question, but you're right. It's certainly a question that provokes our thinking a lot.
Yeah. So 30 years.
Yeah.
One of the things that you've always sort of been fantastic at, and you talked a few minutes ago about how you see people around you, they inspire you to lift your game. I think it would be safe to say, and you might have been of a similar mind, when I first met you, I have always sort of thought of myself to being, if I was ever in a group of speakers, I'd always fancy my chances as being a front runner. Yeah. All right? Right? Because let's be honest.
It's good to have self-confidence.
Let's be honest. This is not necessarily, as we both know, it's not people's favourite thing to do.
It's not.
And you don't meet a bucket full of people that actually love public speaking, or even if they do love it, they aren't necessarily great at it.
Right.
I mean, confidence doesn't always equal good. And when I met you, I thought, oh, wow, okay, this guy's good. I can learn one or two things here, right? So, yes, it's been a mutual inspiration to each other. One of the things that I think that, you're particularly good at is reading technical information and then extracting it out and putting it into something that people can easily access. And I will give you absolute credit for this, having read a lot of personal development books. Your book, Unashamedly Superhuman, great title, by the way.
Thank you.
Straight off the bat there. Yeah. Really delivers on that, on things that people can go and use. So let's just talk a little bit about, how did that come about?
Yeah, I think, well, to answer your first point about extracting information from some complex content, I've always thought of myself as a good delegate, right? I like going to conferences. I've always liked being in the room listening to other speakers. I've always been impressed by speakers who are good. But at the same time, I've always sat in the audience thinking, why am I interested? Why has that worked? Why hasn't that worked? How haven't they connected? So I try and take a sort of meta view as a speaker on being in the audience as much as I'm the person that's front of room, right? So, so again, looking for ideas that work, it's looking for ideas that work for the end user, And I think that leans into being a good speaker, because you're mindful of your audience, you're mindful of their takeaways. And I suppose when I thought about the book, what I wanted to do with the book was put in more than I had time to say. Right? If you're a conference speaker, you got an hour.
You got an hour, yeah.
Right? If you're working with a leadership team, you got an afternoon. Occasionally, I'll do full day sessions, but typically that isn't the norm. It's normally 45 minutes to 90 minutes. And there were so many things that I found I needed to understand for my own performance that I wasn't going to get into a speech. And that was why I really wanted to write the book. I wanted to go into it in more detail and take some of these topics, especially around neuroscience. It wasn't my thing. I didn't come from that background. I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm an enthusiast. I'm a participant, right? So, I'm prepared to put in the 100 hours of podcast listening to Professor Andrew Huberman is a good example.
Indeed, yeah.
Or Michael Gervais, another doctor in the US I like very much. He's got a great program around finding mastery. And it's technical. It can be long form conversations, and there'll be things in there that are just gold that most of my clients aren't going to listen to. So, I think what I want to do is be this, distill that down to the nuggets, the key ideas, and then have them start to explore and expand them back out in their life.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I noticed you structured the book around better, smarter, stronger.
Yeah.
And having read the book and understood a lot of the concepts in it, and it's, not massively dissimilar to some of the things we would talk about in our Power Up program. But I think the area that you really, I think it really shines through to me. I mean, it all does, but I think the area that perhaps our listeners may not have heard as much about is the stronger element, which specifically relates to the use of using physiology as a device to improve your performance, etc.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because you're right. Typically working in the corporate sector, if I'm speaking at an event, conference, an annual conference or leadership development program, typically I'm building content around their goals, their themes. And typically it's around leading change. It's about high performance. It's about adaptation to the market. It's about the corporate challenges of the day. And that tends to lead towards the first two sections of the book. So the first section is about tapping potential. It's about, I say better, it's about performance improvement. Well, that fits perfectly well with the corporate sector. The next section, smart, is about mindset. So how do you unpack this idea of being able to shift mindset? Very corporate. But the third section, stronger, is about tapping into physiology. I suppose if there's a dotted line from that to the world I speak in, it's resilience would be in there. And the other element of the third section, stronger, is about energy levels. How do I manage my energy throughout the day, weeks and months? Because as much as that connects to performance, that isn't something I talk about very much in the corporate sector. Most of the content in that third section I knew was relevant, and it underpinned my ability to perform, i.e. resilience and energy levels, but it's not a topic that's going to be on the corporate agenda so much. So I'm glad I wrote it, and I'm glad you're asking about it.
You told me a story about, I think it was someone at Deloitte who we both do work with, where they were talking about well-being and performance.
Yeah. So that was the what sparked the idea of the book. I mean, I'd had a speech called Unashamedly Superhuman because I was just desperate for some new ideas and some new content. And I was thinking, I like the phrase unashamedly superhuman because it's provocative in that no one's sitting there going, I'm superhuman. That's a strange claim to make. Unless you've got some wild, unique talent, like a superhero.
When I first heard that, I kind of knew where you were coming from. But I think to a lot of people, superhuman, it's like, oh, so this is for like an elite.
Correct.
Top 5% of top 5%. But that's not where you're coming from.
Totally not. And that's the reveal in the book. Right. Whereas it sounds like I'm talking about, I'm going to do a study of, you're right, the top few percent, who have done something remarkable. And we look at them pointing of their superhuman.
And just to pause you there, I mean, when we're thinking about superhuman people, you're talking about who? People who break records or athletes? Or
well, I think that's what the norm would be.
Yeah.
The superhero. Yeah. So to go to the Marvel comics, the Superman, Superwoman, the extra strong, they can fly. I mean, they can do remarkable things. That's not me. And it's not...
You disappoint me.
It's far too modest to be claiming my superhuman capabilities. But it's not anyone I know that's stand out to that extent that it's remarkable. I mean, there are people out there, right? But that's not the audience. My audience are high potentials. These are people that are they're all striving for something. So the superhuman in this book it's almost like separate the two words, superhuman.
Yes.
It's like extraordinary.
Yes.
There's extraordinary, and there's extra, get the ordinary things right at an extra level. And I wanted to work that out. What is it? What's consistent in everybody? What sits built within our nervous system, within our physiology, and with our brain, I suppose, that we all have access to, but we don't always know how to access it. So if I knew a little more about how the machinery works, how the operating system works, could I tap into that and create superhuman results? And what I mean by that is whatever your objectives are. Right, so by
modelling what those people do who produce supposedly superhuman performance,
and also modelling yourself when you do, because everybody at some point will tap into something. They'll dig deep. It could be driven by necessity, it could be driven by inspiration, but sometimes we surprise ourselves with quite how good we are. And I just wanted to go, okay, I like the sound of that. It's like saying, what's that cliche you hear all the time now? Be your best self. Be your best. I know what you need. You need to be your best self.
Be your best self.
And you go, intuitively it makes sense, but what is that? I mean, how do you even unpack that? I wanted to unpack it. So Better, Smarter, Stronger, tapping into potential, mindset, and physiology was my attempt to unpack what is remarkable about everybody. And if you know it, it's not in any doubt to me. And I think when people read the book, by the end, and I've had a lot of feedback like this, they'll come back, and by the end, you're right, there's way more to me than meets the eye, right, is the observation. Correct.
Hence the word unashamedly, I assume.
Well, that's where that kicks in. So if superhuman is the sexy word, I'll tell you why it's superhuman, and I'll unravel it for you. Unashamedly is agreeing, accepting, and then testing it. Oh, it looks like I have got more. There's more to me than meets the eye. Well, now what are you going to do? Unashamedly is trusting it, and it's accepting it as a norm rather than, see, we're so conditioned to not want to stand out. You think you're it, you think you're clever, you think you're something special. We're conditioned in school to move away from that brand. And what I'm saying is, well, actually, you are quite special. And unashamedly is my attempt to say, let it be, accept it, and then don't find out. Find out if you align some of these models in the book, you're gonna surprise yourself with quite how capable you are. And I'm sort of saying, let's do it on purpose, not in reaction to something.
And you've had your own little test ground here, let's be honest.
Yeah, I did, yes. Now, so my
just
test,
a small one.
Yeah, especially for the third section. It definitely relates to all three. But for the third section on Stronger, I thought, what can I do that's physically demanding, where I'm going to have to learn some new ways of operating. Now, at the time, I was probably, mid-50s at the time. I was set in my ways to some extent. I'd had, physically, my structure wasn't particularly capable. I'd had, double disc fusions, 3D operation. So structurally,
Been on your back for a few months, for a few times.
A number of operations. So, I wasn't in the best physical state, let's say. It wasn't that I was unhealthy, but I certainly wasn't an athlete. So I thought, what can I take on that's going to really test this? So, when, you're right, I was provoked by a partner at Deloitte who said, right at the beginning, have you got anything that combines high performance and well-being? At that point, this is about 4 years ago, my response was, well, not really. I mean, it's kind of either or, isn't it? You're either a type A full-tilt go-getter or you look after yourself. And this is before well-being was on everyone's mission statement. Then, of course, I thought on it and thought, that's ridiculous. You have to find a way to combine these two. So when I set out this challenge for me, and I wasn't going to write about it, I didn't tell anybody about it, if you remember. Very few people knew I was doing it. So for those that are listening in, it was an Ironman triathlon. It's a particular endurance event. Which involves, 2.4 mile swim, jump on the bike for 112 miles, then run a marathon, which was ridiculous.
Which takes about how long?
It took me a little under 12 and a half hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the global average for all Ironman finishers of any age is 12 hours 31. So my goal, my performance goal was to beat the global average for any age, which I thought was quite lofty. That's the performance piece. But the well-being piece was I had to feel as good at the end as I did at the beginning. It was no good doing it because I would have pushed through mentally, I'm sure, and then ended up in hospital again, right? So I had to be as capably, physically strong at the end and well as I was at the beginning. So that was the challenge. Now, look, the reason I wasn't going to put it in the book initially, that's not book worthy, right? I know people who've done remarkable physical feats. I mean, there's a guy in Wales recently, Sean Conway, just did 105 Ironmen in 105 days.
Amazing.
That's book worthy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, let's not underplay it.
I'm not underplaying.
Let's not underplay it. I mean, I've run a couple of marathons, and that was hard enough.
Yeah,
most people wouldn't even attempt that.
I don't underplay the achievement of it. And if someone does one, I got respect, because it's some challenge.
As you well know, it's, you could probably train for a marathon in 3 months. To train for an Ironman,
from where I was,
from the starting point,
it seemed impossible. But that was kind of the point. And either I was going to find out that I couldn't do it, or I was going to learn some really fascinating things that worked. And that's what ended up happening. And by the end of the session, at the end of the day when I did it, I was more amazed, not by the fact that I'd done an Ironman, but by the fact that it actually it felt all right. It wasn't, the things that I'd been testing showed up. They worked. So in terms of this piece around stronger, I didn't get to the end and have to really dig deep. I mean, it was tough, but I didn't have to, kill myself to do it. The tactics I deployed, and there was a lot of tactics, a lot of strategies over the course of that 18 months when I was training for it. And even that, it wasn't supposed to be 18 months. It was supposed to be a year. Then I had the bike accident, woke up in an ambulance, had to cancel it for 6 months, signed up again for April, remember 2020. I was going to go to Dallas, do it in the US. COVID hits, rolled it over a year. COVID still wouldn't let me do it. So now it's a 3.5 year project that I wanted to get out of my system in a year, right?
Yeah. This is a long time to give up red wine. I mean, let's face it, you were quite partial to a glass.
I was quite enthusiastic. So you're right, for a lifestyle change, which it was, if you talk about building in new habits, it was seismic for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
To have it for 3 years really wasn't the plan. And then to end up actually doing one on my own, because there still wasn't one to do, because the events weren't an option. So to kind of schedule my own event and do it with nobody else being there, other than being tracked by you and a few others, so you could see I wasn't cheating. That was another kind of level of challenge psychologically. That there was no Ferrari, no cheering crowds,
and shouting and cheering, and other people around you keeping.
But that really helped me test some of the other ideas in the book around mindset and around the sort of meditative strategies for staying calm and staying tuned in the zone, if you like. So to your point, yes, it was a good challenge. It even though I wasn't going to write about it, I did, because it became so obvious that the things that I'd learned worked. I had to reference it against something.
Well, it's that classic thing, isn't it? It's not the achievement of the goal itself, but it's who you become.
Yeah.
Through the achievement of the goal, and what you learn about yourself, and the things, the strategies you have to take on, what you have to start saying no to, new habits you have to form.
Yeah.
And I remember you going through it. I remember very clearly, the various different setbacks you say with the accident. I mean, that's a story in itself. I mean, you were literally, I think, peak fitness. You were 6 weeks.
I'm going to
you were
Copenhagen.
Literally tapering your training. Yeah. And gust of wind by a lorry and pinged you over the side, and
a lot of 3 months out, really. Yeah. Just having to.
I mean, there are others that might just go, I tell you what, maybe it's not meant to be.
Yeah, I mean,
sensible people.
there is that. The problem is that by this point I had the book deal.
Yeah.
Right. And I was halfway through writing the book, and I was almost, and I knew I was going to reference it. I thought, I've got to get this thing done. I mean, I can't publish the book, without having this done, because now it became quite important. Yeah. So I had lots of motive from a few different angles, But no, the point is it worked, and this piece around stronger, this third section, this tapping into physiology, so it connects to resilience. Right. When I say resilience, there's lots of conversations we have about resilience and directions we can go. The direction I went in was, how do you condition yourself physically, psychologically, to raise your threshold for stress? Because whether it's physical stress like the Ironman or stress of our day, resilience to me is the ability to take on more with it having less effect, negative impact. Right, so that was the model. So that's why the Ironman worked. And I think
the other key thing, as you said a few minutes ago, is finishing that challenge, but actually feeling good at the end of it. And I think that is
really
a
fundamental,
very, very key thing. I have not at all, and Lisa, who I run this podcast with, we talk a lot about happily achieving.
Right.
We're really very strong on the idea that certain speakers will say, sacrifice everything to get what you want, put everything on hold, do what you have to do now to get what you want later. This is, maybe in my 20s, I subscribed to that philosophy. And I suddenly realised, with a few hiccups on the way, making money, losing money, and a few setbacks, one of the things you really have to make sure you do in life is happily achieve. Yeah. And so if you can actually get to the end of that goal, but you're used up, you've got nothing left to give, you've hurt yourself, you've injured yourself. What kind of example is that?
Yeah.
I think that philosophy is very strong.
Yeah, and whether it's taking on a physical challenge like this or just, going about your work, you want to push yourself to achieve as much as you can, because I think there's something worthy in that, right? Find out how good you are, take on challenge. And at the end of it, you're right. I felt unstoppable from the inside out. I felt structurally unbelievably capable. Whereas 3 years before, after several back operations and disc fuse and knee operations, I felt like a wreck.
Yeah.
So the payback wasn't just doing the art. You're right. I could have not done the Ironman.
Because you'd achieved the state.
I'd squared off with myself.
Yeah.
I've actually achieved everything I wanted to achieve with the.
I'll tell you what I'd like you to cover, because you talked a little bit about being in the zone.
Yeah.
And I'd like to talk a little bit about this. Gets often talked about. You hear podcast speakers or written in books about getting into flow, and I think it's quite a misunderstood area. And I know you thought quite a little bit about this.
I have.
You did I think it was Steve Kotler, wasn't it? You did some programs with, and you really delved into this in a big way. So could you just talk a little bit about flow? How do you get into it? What it actually is? Etc.
Yeah, I was fascinated by this, and I didn't realize it at the time when I was writing the book. All I knew when I was writing the book was I was under a tremendous amount of pressure from the publishers have deadlines. I was up against the edge of my capability, and probably extended past my capability. And every time I started a new chapter, it was overwhelming, right? So I knew that to do that, to achieve the project and finish the project, I knew I had to understand more about this thing called flow. I'd heard about it. I liked the concept of it, but I had to be able to look at the mechanics of it so I could predict it. In other words, if I say to somebody, look, we've all been in the zone. We're familiar with the phrase, you're right, being in the zone. Whether it's related to sports or business or any context, what does that mean, I was in the zone? Well, when you explore that, people will say things like, super focused, lost track of time a little bit, everything seemed effortless, making interesting distinctions, got super creative. When they define, in my research, when they define flow, they define it simply as that state of mind you're in where you both feel and perform at your best. That's how it's simplified, right? So when you talk about being your best self, well, that's just an abstract cliche. Well, I'll tell you what, if you want to understand your best self, you've got to understand flow, because flow is you feeling and performing at your best. What I wanted to try and work out with it was, how can I predict it so that, let's say next Thursday at 4 PM, you've got a piece of work you want to do, or you've got a presentation to give, or you're going to play around at golf, or there's something that's important to you, and you'd really like to be in the zone. It would be beneficial to your performance. I thought, right.
And surely that is the whole art, isn't it? To be able to bring your best of your abilities when you need it most.
It's to understand
that has got to be a determining factor that separates the
exactly right
almost great from the great.
Yeah, I think some people learn how to do it intuitively. Some people, if you look at sports people, they will know and undoubtedly be doing that more often than not. Most of them probably don't do it with a strategy in mind. They just get good at it. And I wanted to know, well, what's the strategy that I could trigger this state of mind? And when I say flow, I mean, if you look at the data, and for those that are interested, you can dive into the weeds in the book, but the neurochemistry of the flow state, it would appear, are 5 neurotransmitters, 5, if you like, brain chemistry. So there's some adrenaline, right? There's some dopamine, which keeps you on the front foot, or adrenaline energizes you, I guess, to a point. There's serotonin, which keeps you feeling calmer in the moment. There's endorphins, which are like your body's natural painkiller, which keeps you moving, keeps you going. And then there's anandamide, which is this, and it helps with pattern recognition, which is why you get really creative. So it's a specific thing. It's not just, I felt quite good. They can measure to see if you actually are in the zone, triggering flow. So the more I looked at it, I started to realize that, I guess, the simplified how-to, which Kotler talks about a lot, is flow follows focus. So that's the first kind of thing I say, okay, flow follows focus. So when you're super focused, you're more than likely going to be tapping into flow. Example I often give is if you're riding a bike on an open field, you're on your bike, there's nothing around you, there's no danger, no consequence, you don't need flow. There's lots in our day, getting some emails done, start putting a few ideas together, don't need flow. Right, got a couple of meetings that aren't that intense, don't need flow. We haven't got to be in flow 8 hours a day. But there are sometimes some situations, high stakes situations, where we need to tap into this. And it's a little bit like riding the same bike down a single track on the side of a mountain. Your brain goes, hang on, you need more than this. I got to give you a little extra here, right? So I want to know, okay, so how do you...
The situation demands some other capacity.
It does. So that,
superhuman capacity.
Superhuman capacity.
Indeed.
And when you trigger this state of mind, you become this superhuman version of yourself, which even though it sounds, again, cliched, I needed it not to. I needed it to be process-led. So how do you trigger it? Well, there are external and internal triggers. The one I know you talk about a lot is the skills challenge balance. So getting the right amount of challenge for the skill level. If the challenge is too big for your skill, you're going to pop out of flow. You're going to be overwhelmed. And you have too much adrenaline, cortisol, stress hormones. So you can't perform at your best there.
Yeah.
If there's not enough challenge, then it's boring and it doesn't trigger enough dopamine or adrenaline. So that's not flow either. So trying to get that balance between the size of the challenge and your skill level. That's the first thing. So, competence is a flow trigger. That you're good at something is going to more likely trigger flow. Right, I often use the image of all the ski run colours, the colours of a ski run. So I don't ski. So if I'm on a green run practicing and you're a black run skier, if you come with me, you're not going to be in flow. And if I come with you, neither will I.
That's a good analogy. Yeah.
Yeah. So and they're there for a reason. You've got to pick your challenge to suit your skills. You want your challenge to stretch you but not snap you. A challenge is big enough that it doesn't keep you up at night, but it gets you up in the morning. So that's the first thing I was thinking about. Okay, so what?
Somewhere between sort of excitement and a little bit of anxiety.
Yeah, that's it.
Just to get the adrenaline going, get these brain chemicals flowing through your body.
Exactly right. And if you can find those challenges in life, you're going to be triggering this idea that you're in a more of a flow state. And we do. There's plenty of them out there. We can come to that later. Then you've got to narrow it down even further. So if flow follows focus, some macro strategies would be things like purpose. Now, we talk about this a lot in the corporate sector. You have your vision, you've got your what you're trying to achieve and your how. Well, the why question, picking up on Simon Sinek's work, the why is what starts triggering dopamine, right? Anticipation of reward. The why, it kind of puts you into that state of worthwhile. There's value in what I'm doing. It's not what you do, it's what you do does. So what is what you do? What do you impact? Who do you help? What does that do? What does it affect? When you go 2 or 3 iterations out, you start to feel this sense of worth. I'm doing some good work. That's a flow trigger, right? Because you're triggering brain chemistry. Good. And it feels good.
It really does feel good.
So going in to do that thing that's difficult, that perhaps you don't really want to do, you do, because you're feeling good about the purpose of it, not the activity. So to the point with the triathlon, I didn't enjoy every second of that event, but I was being fueled by more than just cranking out the miles. Right, so purpose is one that is worth considering. But then you got to get a bit more tactical. So if purpose is your direction of travel, so that's your dot on the horizon, your vision, then you drop underneath that with your mission critical goals. So what are your big goals in life? Why are you trying to achieve those? We've all got goals, I would suggest, certainly the corporate sector. And then what drops below that are your daily goals, the daily tasks. And this is where you get a real opportunity to trigger flow, because what's the flip side of flow? What's the kryptonite of flow? It's distraction. Right? So if you're and look, in a world of noise, it's not easy to stay focused, and flow follows focus. So if you've got a piece of deep work to do, first cut, and there's a great phrase they use, tactic they use called focus sprints. A focus sprint.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So we know what a sprint is. It's a burst of energy, right? Well, if you take that same concept into how you focus on a piece of work, right, I've got 90 minutes. I'm going to block out 90 minutes. The door's locked. The phone's off. There's no snack runs when you're not even hungry, right? There's no checking your emails. You block out all forms of distraction.
There's a specific name, dividing up your day into different sections.
Right, yeah.
To allow time for this concentrated burst of energy.
Yeah.
Then you have a rest.
Yeah.
Then you go back into it. I always think it's ridiculous when leaders say, they're having a meeting and they just say, let's just push on through. Let's push on through.
Yeah, totally.
False economy.
And there's so much data out there that says you can't cognitively function at your best, for most of us, for more than about 90 minutes. If you're like fully tuned in, dialed in, doing some deep work.
So this concentrated period of focus is then followed by what?
Definitely followed by some recovery time. And in fact, there's a very specific flow cycle, again, that Kotler talks about, where I bumped into this when I was writing the book. But I saw it. I tell you, a great place to see this in action was the Beatles documentary that came out a couple of years ago,
this,
right? Get Back. So these 3-hour if you're into the Beatles, it's great to watch anyway.
Amazing. I'd highly recommend it.
And what you're going to see in front of you are 4 people who are at the top of their game. They're under pressure. They're not really getting on. It's the back end of the Beatles, getting towards the end. You can see there was a bit of friction there, but they're challenged to write an album, and they've got a matter of weeks to do it. They're going to put together a live event, so there's pressure. So that's the first flow trigger. Consequence. If there's consequence, that triggers, as long as the size of the challenge doesn't outweigh your capability. So it didn't. But then what you'll see them struggling to find the lyrics for a tune, and you got Paul McCartney kind of strumming along, trying to go, Jojo was a man from was it Arizona? Is Tucson in Arizona? They're brainstorming, but they're struggling, and they're not getting much traction. And that's called the struggle phase. All right, and I found that, and people, when they think about it, will be able to think into this and recognize when they've experienced this. When I started a chapter, it was like pain, struggle. What's the point? Where's my content? What am I drawing from? Pulling ideas together, bringing in different concepts. Yeah. It's struggle.
It's like curating a program. You start with a blank sheet of paper, and it's really hard to get out the blocks.
Right,
isn't it?
And that's not flow, right? But there's a very predictable 4-step process that it would appear, and I've definitely tested this. Flow shows up, struggle is phase 1. It's almost like a barrier to entry for most people, because they're in the struggle phase, and it is a struggle, it is painful, and then they'll just go and they'll distract themselves. I'm going to go and have a coffee. I'm going to go and check my emails. I'm going to do a bit of social media. Nothing wrong with any of those things, but you're doing it because you're struggling. And I want to take myself away from this piece of work. What the flow cycle says is struggle first, then you have a conscious break, and there's like a release phase. It's not a distraction. It's not like, I want to get away from this. You get to a point where you watch the Beatles. They'll stop, and then they start just jamming, and they start singing all sorts of songs, laughing, joking. There's banter, right?
So rather than keeping the pressure on,
yeah, you give yourself a certain amount of time of struggle, and then you just pause and go, okay, I think I've done enough collecting of information. Right, I'm going to pause now. I'm going to go for a run. And how many times have you done that? Right, where you go for a run, or you jump on the bike, or you just go for a walk in the country for 20 minutes, and you're not thinking about that piece of work consciously, and you go,
the ideas.
What if I did that, and then if I could pull that in there? So that's called the release phase. So struggle, release. Once you get the release phase, you're then going to get into flow. You get back to the work, and you start putting in the time in this flow state. And you got to monitor and measure and pay attention. You might go back into struggle a bit, maybe need a bit more time just to release. But it was quite predictable. I'd struggle maybe 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour sometimes, take a break, go into release, relax, do something that's not connected, come back, get into the deep work for no more than 60 to 90 minutes. And then that's the key to your point. There has to be recovery, because that brain chemistry is exhausting. It's productive and it's enjoyable, but man, it takes it out of you.
And it's interesting, isn't it? That I think most people listening to this can probably identify with this when they're doing something. But once you get into flow, it's like foot on the gas time.
Yeah.
It's like the output you get, the productivity you get in that shorter period of time is incredible.
It's incredible.
The very best ideas come as well.
It's an action state. And it's not effortless. A passive state, right? It's effortless, but it's not passive. It's an action state. Yeah. It's demanding. Yeah. In fact, McKinsey's did a study where they studied a whole group of execs, senior execs, and they were looking at flow and how productive they were in and out of flow. And their observation, the back end of this data was they reckon the execs were 5 times more effective when they were in flow. 5 times. They're thinking quicker. They're making better decisions, distinctions. Yeah. So,
remember the early days of SI, you, me, and Colin in a room together.
No
We'd
question.
Start off, how are we going to deal with this? And then, you start to burn through it, and you relax a bit, and then suddenly there's just magic happens.
You hit a rich vein. Right?
It's like bouncing ideas around, the brilliant ideas, great phrases come out. It's incredible.
It is. It's a real thing. It's magical.
Yeah,
and it's hard to talk about it as an observer of it. When you're in it, it's easy to talk about it, right? And I think for people to understand, it's very predictable. It is a thing. We've all experienced it. But if you can look at some of these little triggers, like, blocking out distraction, like having a very clear outcome for this piece of work, flow follows focus. So direct yourself in.
Have a reason for doing it.
Like writing out, what am I trying to achieve? Why is this critical to me? Why is it important? What's the value to me? Just, 5 minutes, scribbling down a few observations about this piece of work you're going to do. it all just narrows the focus in, right? And then at the end of it, recovery is key. I mentioned Michael Gervais earlier on, performance coach in the US. And that's a line, I quote him a lot, and you'll know the quote, where he said, high performers do two things every day. They push themselves to the edge of their ability, then they recover in a world-class way. And it really stuck with me, that recover in a world-class way. When I started with the triathlon, I was asking other triathletes about their strategy, and every single one of them would say, you've got to put as much focus on recovery as you do the discipline, which I'd never thought of that. I thought you train. And I went, you're never going to do it. You're going to get injured or you'll be ill. And it's the same in work too, to your point about, pushing through. Instead of going, right, every 90 minutes, every hour, maybe 2 hours, you block out 10, 15 minutes.
I'd say that is the one big change I've probably made in my lifestyle the last couple of years.
Right.
Is to actually decide ahead of time. If you look at a week, the problem is with recovery is that if you don't plan for it and work just takes over, you have to actually prioritize it. That's the key thing. Is you sort of recover in a world-class way, but you've got to prioritize. When am I going to do that? Oh, I've got 3 busy days, right? I'm flying, I'm getting off a plane, I'm doing this, I've got this demand. So when am I going to build it in? Yeah. And you have to decide it ahead of time. That's when you're going to do it. Yeah, and also my take on it is you do it even if you don't feel like you need it. Yeah. You think like you could be flying, you're feeling great, and you go, I don't need to build any recovery in. This is another big mistake. I've had my own experience of this. They're thinking, actually, I'm doing all right. Yeah, I don't need to do those things anymore. I'm okay. And then bang, the cold comes or the sore throat comes. You're running on adrenaline, and at some point the adrenaline crashes, and you go on holiday and you get cold. It's classic, So the idea is rather than push till you get a point of diminishing return, collapse on the weekend, you go, I'm going to build strategically into the day, 2 10-minute, this is what we're talking about, 2 10-minute active recovery breaks, I don't know, mid to late morning, mid-afternoon, and active recovery isn't... Yeah, when you talk about active recovery, what do you mean by active recovery? Yeah, so active recovery isn't necessarily, scrolling or checking out your emails or doing a bit of social media. I've got no problem with that. It's very relaxing in some regards. Active recovery is where you actively decompress. You cognitively chunk down a little bit, right? Active might be active. You go for a walk. You do something physical. Right, so you're doing something that makes you feel more energized. It could be light exercise. It could be, some form of, I don't know, some people into meditation. Right, it could be, Andrew Huberman talked a lot about NSDR, non-sleep deep relaxation or non-sleep deep rest, where it's just like 10 minutes with some guided meditation. Just because you're literally switching off, energy. So it's not overexerting yourself. It's not like doing going out for belting out on a your exercise regime is separate. Yeah. Like going to the gym for an hour, that's another thing. That should be in your strategy too, potentially. But active recovery is just doing something, short bursts, 10 minutes twice, 15 minutes maximum, of just decompressing and dissociating. This is tricky. Cognitively dissociating. I think this is tricky for people because you're A-type driver who potentially is listening to this thinking, I'll make time for going down the gym because I'm going to get something from that, and I'm going to, it's like I'm looking for an immediate return. Yeah, it's not what you're talking about. I would treat active recovery, and again, this is not just me pitching this. I've talked to a lot of people who, like you, who've found a way to build these things into their life, and after 2 or 3 months, it's like everything feels 10% easier. Yes, I look at active recovery like supplements. Like taking some vitamins in the morning. I was just thinking the same thing, actually, yes. You take some supplements. You don't expect to feel better now. No. You just trust the fact that it's doing you some good over the long run. Yeah. And I think putting in, small bite-sized pieces of recovery, even like micro recovery, it could just be, it could be 2 minutes. Yeah. 2 minutes just kind of just gazing out the window and just decompressing, looking at your peripheral vision, letting more information come in and just pausing and then you go back into the next meeting. Microsoft just briefly put out some data this time last year I read it. And there's a great image I saw where they had brain scans of people like you and I who do a full day of meetings back to back. So there were 4 20-minute meetings back to back, and they monitored with a brain cap, where they looked at the ECG activity, stress levels in the brain, right? And it started off like kind of yellow, went to orange, and after the 4th meeting was pretty red. And what that's suggesting is the stress accumulated. The meetings weren't necessarily stressful,
but the switching from one thing to the other. They did the same people the day after, 4 meetings with a 10-minute break between each meeting, started off kind of yellow, stayed yellow, remained yellow, and after 4 meetings, it was still the same level of stress in their system. And you just go, look, on any given day, I doubt you'd have felt the difference between those two people. They might not have felt the difference, but for 200 days of the year, right? These are marginal gains, right?
Challenges are.
They're marginal gains.
Well, you kind of, it doesn't really make sense because you were saying that. I was trying to think to myself that it's like a day. We've got so used to working from home, doing Zoom meetings, and everybody fills up every minute of your diary. And we you and I both talk to executives about this and do the same type of work here, and saying, look, if you one meeting after another. Yes, you're sort of chest beating type day. Look what I've achieved today. But how productive and how much of your cognitive ability have you been able to bring every second of every meeting?
Yeah, that's it.
And we do talk a lot about being able to bring all of your abilities consistently throughout the day. You know yourself. I know for myself that if I'm having a day where I'm going from one, I can feel it in my neck. I can feel it in my shoulders.
Yeah.
You start to feel dehydrated, but I remember, lucky to live very near a river, and we have a dog, which is great as well. That's very good for, some of this sort of active recovery. And I went for a walk this morning. I didn't have a huge amount of time to do it, but as I was coming back, I just felt great. I thought, I'm so pleased And I actually did my first phone call walking along the river. Yeah. And I felt so much better for doing it. But coming back to our earlier point, you've got to, if you want this to work for you, you've got to actually make a decision. That's what you're going to do. And you've got to appreciate that those 10 minutes you're talking about that feels like you don't have the time to do is actually going to make you more productive.
That's the only point that matters.
That's
right?
the only point that matters. Yes.
Taking these short,
please take a note
these
of
short
this point.
active recovery breaks.
Exactly.
The purpose of them is to increase performance.
Yeah.
It's not to rest. It's not a cop out.
Yeah.
You snooze, you lose.
Yeah.
Like back in the 90s, burnout was a badge of honor.
Yeah.
Right? Nowadays, people are getting hurt. Right. Yeah. We want to be, to pick up a phrase I heard Colin say, you want to get home after a full day flat out and your family get the best of you, what's left of you. Right. And how often do we kind of trade in that? We kind of let it, we kind of do give the best of us and there's nothing left. Yeah. Right. And there's a consequence to that. Yeah. So it really, again, you're right. I'm not trying to overly sell the concept of stopping. But if there's performance data to say that cognitively, in terms of how you think clearly, the decisions you'll make, how effective you are, go up when you build in some active recovery, that's all that matters.
Yeah, this is really important because I think that people get confused about this and think, I'm going to go down the gym and decompress. I'm going to bang out some weights and hit it hard on the gym and hit the treadmill and actually they come back completely exhausted because it's depletion. It's more depletion. It's more depletion. Withdrawal. You're not. So I think it's a very important distinction.
Yeah.
You have a section in your book called the Big Three to Thrive. Easy for you to say. Right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Look, the Big Three to Thrive I put in because, they're the big three to thrive in terms of strength, physical capability. And if you buy into the fact that there's a mind-body connection, that if you're physically fit and healthy, that will affect you psychologically, and that's generally a good thing. The big three are sleep, exercise, and nutrition. No argument there.
Yeah.
Anyone that's coming
it's not that people haven't heard of that before.
This is completely overt. No surprises, no aha moments, right? Those are the big three to thrive. If you want to look at recovery, sleep, critical, beats all forms of recovery, hands down. Right? Now, if you're not getting a tremendous amount of sleep, you better have some other plans, which is what I get into.
Having said that, it's one of those classic things that people know about, but they're not necessarily doing what they know.
Yeah, no, for sure.
True.
Yeah, and it's almost like we've been doing this for a long time. I've been going to sleep most nights for many years. What are you going to tell me about sleep?
Indeed.
Right? But it's become quite a hot topic over the last decade, I think.
Yeah.
I think sleep's become a big deal. People they wear their Whoop straps, their Oura rings, they track their data. And you become mindful of, you think you're getting 8 hours, but actually you look at the data, you probably got 6.
I have to say, this is why I'm bringing it up, that the sleep thing, it's something that I have, particularly this year, I made a goal and I went, right, I want to get at least 7 hours sleep. But the thing that's really surprised me was actually how long you have to physically be in a place where you are going to sleep, wherever that is, in bed.
To get 7.
Right, to get 7.
Yeah, and it's probably 8.5.
Yeah, it's at least, I would say on an average, awake time most nights is an hour.
Yeah, it's pretty standard.
So you have to get to bed earlier, get there rested.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge. One of those tricky. But I tell you what I said at the beginning of the Big 3 to Thrive is these are barbed wire topics. These are topics. I never talk about these 3 in work ever. It's never on the agenda at a conference. This is purely book chat and podcast chat, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so divisive. People have got their own experiences. You talk about nutrition, diet, exercise. Oh, I've tried that. Oh, I've done that. That didn't work. Look, each to their own on this one. In fact, I think I start that section by saying, I bought a pair of swimming goggles. Ridiculously expensive swimming goggles when I started the training, and they're called the Magic 5, and they arrive in a real posh case that you never use again, but they cost a lot of money, these swimming goggles. And when you buy them, you download an app and you scan your face with the app, and then it builds a pair of goggles to the contours of your bone structure.
Wow.
And the strap line for these goggles is why I bought them is one size fits one. One size fits one.
Nice.
That's why I bought them.
That's a great metaphor.
It's a great metaphor. Where you're going here. Right. Yeah. So when I start this section on the Big 3 to Thrive, in fact, anything around stronger, around physiology, I go, look, one size fits one. I'm not coming at this with a solution for everybody. No. I've tested it. I can back up what I'm saying, but you got, you're your own human being. You got your own, idiosyncrasies, your own, metabolism. You got your own genetics, right? So I'm not going down the route of being a doctor on this one. I'm not professing.
What do you say to people who say, yeah, I know what you're talking about, I only need 4 hours?
Yeah, and there are plenty of people.
Speak to Matthew Walker, maybe?
Hey, listen, I dive deep into some of the data around sleep. You look, Churchill,
He's the guru, isn't he?
Churchill, Thatcher. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Churchill, Thatcher. There are people who 4 hours, 5 hours sleep. But then when you look a little deeper, or at least I looked at some content around them.
Churchill never looked that healthy, though, did he really? Let's be honest.
You kind of wonder physically how well they felt. But they also napped. They napped. Now, it doesn't matter when you get your 8 hours or your 7 hours.
Yeah.
I get probably between 5.5 and 6 hours sleep a night, pretty much every night. Never much more than 6 hours. But I do during the day, I'll have at least one. I don't nap, by the way. I envy the napper. I just can't nap. I think it's FOMO. I think it's something happening that I'm missing, right? But there's great data around. When you nap, the cognitive restoration you get allows you to push on and perform better. Now, Churchill, every 4 hours he'd take a 20-minute nap, right? Thatcher, similarly, every 4 hours there'd be a 20, 30-minute nap. Einstein, Salvador Dali, Leonardo da Vinci. These are some of the things I was reading about. All
superhuman beings.
Yeah. They all napped of one form or another. Now, there's something called micro-nap. So Einstein and Salvador Dali, they micro-napped. So they'd sit there, they'd hold a pen or a key. They just close their eyes and just breathe for a moment. And then they typically drop off because they're busy people, right? And as soon as they drop off, they drop the pen or the key on the floor, they'd wake them up. So it was a 60-second nap. That's all it took. Reset, go again. So I'm not talking a 40-minute sleep here. Yeah. It could be just a moment of just letting yourself go. Yeah. Now, if you want the data...
just thinking about that, a real practical example of that is that when you're driving and you feel tired.
Right.
I've done it in the past. I used to do a lot of driving. I would stop my car, set my alarm for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It's incredible.
It is incredible.
I mean, you've gone from literally not being able to keep your eyes open to feeling completely wide awake.
Completely refreshed. So we know there's something going on that we can utilise there. So if you look at some of the science on it, because again, I'm not a napper, so I'd struggle with that. But again, I'll reference Andy Huberman, because I do quite a lot. He talks about NSDR, these non-sleep deep relaxation. So it's a 10-minute, you can just Google that, NSDR, non-sleep deep relaxation, or Yoga Nidra.
Non-sleep
deep rest, deep relaxation, NSDR, or Yoga Nidra. And it's typically, you just get you'll get a guided meditation, and even the word meditation freaks out most people. What I mean by that is it gets you just to close your eyes, manage your breathing, and it just kind of gets you to do a sense check through your body. So you focus on your hand, your arm, your shoulder, and you just kind of do a body scan, basically. It takes about 10, 15 minutes. You can get a 10-minute one, a 20-minute one. It's phenomenal. And I do that every day, especially if I haven't slept well. If I've had a bad night, or for whatever reason, I haven't slept well.
It's guided, is it?
It's
like
guided. It's guided. You just Google it. Google Andrew Huberman, NSDR, or go on Spotify. That's where I got mine, Spotify, NSDR. And you'll see these scripted little guided meditations. There's nothing weird about it. That's what I like about it. It's neuroscience. You come out the other side, and it's just taking you through a process where you decompress, reset, cognitively downgrade, back into balance, and then I'm back out.
Yeah.
Again, the purpose of recovery is performance. It's part of your high performance strategy, recovery. It's not getting over a hard day. It's not getting over a tough morning. Yeah. It's built in.
I really absolutely love this concept of well-being and performance together.
Yeah.
I think we're really, really onto something here.
I couldn't look my clients in the eye and say, I'll talk to you about well-being. I love the idea of well-being, looking after yourself, and companies should have strategies.
And there are people who are better informed to do that.
And that's their thing. Right? And well-being in the workplace, it's a genre of information that if I was running a business, I'd be tapping into. I'm not. I'm talking about performance and high performance in high-stakes situations, high pressure, consistency. So to me, high performance is productivity. Well-being is sustainability. It's the ability to sustain, to your point, this level of performance. So it's not a soft option. It's a hard edge to this message, right?
Yeah. No, I love it. I mean, it's when you look at people like Alex Honnold, I know you're a big fan of, the free climber. It's, again, you look at it initially and you think, wow, superhuman. Yeah. And then you start unpicking it.
And you go, not superhuman.
Not superhuman.
No, you work out that he can free solo and climb with no ropes like nobody else can. And he'll do climbs that many climbers can do with ropes and never need their ropes. But they'd never do it because his edge is his ability to stay cognitively relaxed, focused, calm, all those things that we talk about. It's not his climbing skill. He's not a better climber. He's seen as the world's greatest climber.
He's able to access it.
He's not a better climber. He's better at accessing those skills. Yeah. Right? And that's, I think, the work that we do. We talk with people about, you've got to work on your skills. You develop yourself in the areas you have to be effective at. What we're interested in is how can we help you to understand yourself more to the point where you can predict that level of performance will show up through time. And you're right. Yeah. Now I'm talking performance and well-being through time, and it won't. I want to make it easier to win, right? Because winning isn't easy. Life's great, it's exciting, but it's bloody hard, right? But I want to make. Is there another way of making life easier to win? So it's almost like when I start the book. I think I mentioned in there that I don't know why you're going to read this book. Maybe you were going to read it because you want to challenge yourself, stretch yourself, achieve more. You're a high performer and you want more, or you want to get exactly the same results and have a little bit left in your tank. Maybe you're getting the results you want. You don't want to earn any more, deliver any more. You're happy with your numbers, but man, it's killing me, right? That's in there too. So there's two elements, right?
It certainly fits with our philosophy. One of the things in our Power Up program we talk a lot about is the idea that you don't actually need to change. What you do need to do is you need to be more who you are. If you make use of who you are, find out what your natural abilities are, your natural strengths are, know, as you're saying, how much sleep you need, how much exercise you need, what nutrition you need. Yeah. Find out what you need. Yeah. What's your one thing, the power of...
Yeah, one size fits one.
One size fits one. Yeah. Be more of actually who you are. Yeah. You might need to make some adjustments, but a wholesale change is hard.
No, and
being more of who you are is easy.
Yeah, that's nice. And I tell you something I was talking about recently. I came across something probably 6 weeks ago. In sports now, as we know, there is a lot of data analytics in sports. The last 10 years, there's so much data in performance in sport. And I was looking at the professional tennis world. And it turns out that if you were going to be an average professional tennis player, like half, right down the middle, average, you've got to win 1 out of 2 points. That's your win ratio, 1 out of 2 points, and you're going to be average, which kind of makes sense. You go, that works. So Djokovic, undoubtedly the best tennis player ever, whether you like him or not, another thing, but his data, stats, world number one, everything, every metric you look at, he's the best. His win ratio is 54%.
Wow.
He wins 54% of the points he plays. Jeez. Just over 1 out of 2, and he's the best on the planet. That translates into 83% of the tournaments he plays in and the matches that he plays, right? So, and we were talking rugby recently with the World Cup, right? You look at the World Cup, South Africa, right? The first team to win it 4 times. Their final, semi-final, and quarter-final, they won each game by 1 point.
I know.
Right? So when we talk about better, and improvement, I'm talking marginal gains. I mean, there are things you can do which can transform you, and I love all that. But generally, in terms of high performance, it is a marginal gain, and a game. And looking at some of those little things you can do, like putting in a couple of active recovery breaks, like being really clear about your why, like having daily disciplines around building time around meetings, so you have a focus sprint, right? These are things that aren't that complex. But they're easy not to do. If you do them, and they all give you 1% or 2%.
Talking about things that are easy not to do, I know you've talked a lot about cold water therapy, and you really got into the Iceman, Wim Hof, and but you followed it, you've done it.
I do it every day.
You do it every day.
Every day, almost without fail.
So you could talk a little bit about that. Because
I'm glad you brought it out, because again, I never talk about this in work. And I say in work, I mean at a conference.
And by the way, anyone listening, there's going to be a great test bed for you in the next few weeks, because bar none, a cold shower has to be the best recovery from a hangover. There is absolutely nothing better. It's again, easy to do, easy not to do.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about why that works.
I found that, so I found that whole topic fascinating.
Yes.
Right? Because it wasn't something I did.
Yeah.
Or
this is where we
do.
come back to that 5 thing I was talking about earlier, become the average of the 5.
Yeah.
This is not something I would have taken up had you not told me about it.
Right. And
seen the benefits.
And seen the benefit, yeah. So you have to know why you're doing it, because it's painful. And
Initially.
the initial bit is always the same.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 3 years. Bought an ice plunge outside in my garden, which I do since January last year. Set at 2 degrees every morning. This morning was no different. The first 30 seconds, you don't want to do it, right?
You literally do this every day.
If I'm at home, every day.
Every day,
yeah. And a cold shower if I'm away, but I like to cook the ice plunge. But they do the same thing. In terms of the data, the results are very similar. There's 2 elements to this that I find interesting. One is this piece around doing things that are hard. And the objective is to raise your threshold for taking on stress. If you can do, well, let's use it as a metaphor. Rather than
putting yourself under stress so you can deal with stress.
Consciously, with a strategy for dealing with it. So I know when I get in the cold water, I'll manage my breathing to the extent where I will equalize within about 30 to 40 seconds. I know it's going to happen. My brain doesn't know that. And when I get in, first off, it thinks I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And it's going, why are you in here?
Well, your body sends a signal to your brain, you're going to die.
Saying, this is unnatural. You don't seem to be getting out of this situation fast.
Yeah.
So we're now going to shut the system down, basically meaning all the blood rushes to the vital organs.
Yeah.
And there's a lot, again, I could do an hour on this, but there's a lot of data around what then happens. And it triggers something called the cold shock protein, which flushes out toxins. I mean, there's a lot of good things happening, right? Over and above the value of doing it, and I'll give you a list of things that you will get from it if you choose to do it. The undercurrent of why I do it is other things in life that used to seem difficult seem easier. When you do something that consciously triggers a stress response that's hard, you're doing a hard thing. No, look, it hasn't got to be an ice bath. It could be a form of exercise where you push yourself. It could be taking on extra responsibility. I'm going to force myself to kind of prepare for speeches that I wouldn't normally want to volunteer for. You're taking on something that triggers adrenaline. But as long as I don't mean adrenaline to the extreme, but it triggers enough adrenaline that the stress response is active.
Again, the flow state idea of not going too crazy.
Not going too crazy, right? Yeah. So you then want to have a process for calming the mind while the body's active. Now, this is the piece I really like. If you do things that trigger adrenaline, stress, because you are going to have stress in life. If you're anybody that's going anywhere, you're going to take on difficult things that are stressful, right? It's not the stress that'll take you down. It's either the lack of recovery or it's the lack of ability to reset this threshold. So I just see it as a metaphor that if I jump in an ice bath and for those 2 minutes, it triggers a stress response that I then control and then I recover from. What it's saying to it's building neural circuits for that pattern. So then when I walk into the conference and there's 1,000 people there and my heart rate's going like this and I feel that the stress level, the adrenaline, I'm training myself to respond quickly so that the adrenaline's still in your body, but your mind is quiet.
Bring yourself back into that parasympathetic.
Right. And when if you're good under pressure, if you're known for being good under pressure, that's what you do. You have an adrenaline hit, your heart rate shifts, that's human. But you're good at staying calm of mind while your body's active. Now, I just kind of go, how do I train myself for those big work events that I've got to be calm of mind when my body's active? well, probably not. I mean, in work, yes, you do get used to these situations in work. But I thought, if there's some other way of training that same system that I can bank on, and to me, that's what this cold exposure, that was the provocation for it. I'll get better at responding to stress. So things that used to stress me don't stress me anymore. That's the payback. Now, that's one value. The other value for doing it is that the hit of dopamine that you get is like 2.5 times baseline. You're going to get and it'll stay in your, say, call it a long arc, where it drops gradually over about 3 or 4 hours. So the energy all morning.
Well, my neighbour does it, and he said that it's like taking 5 espressos. I think he used the phrase.
Yeah, with no negative impact.
Yeah, with no negative
There's
impact.
No come down. There's no come down. Whereas a coffee will take you up and bring you down, so you grab another one, right? Like other drugs, I suppose, and a different conversation there. But the dopamine hit from a cold water shock is it spikes the adrenaline, that gets turned into dopamine, and it sits in your system and just trickles out over the next few hours. So I get a lot of return on that because I'm very productive in the morning. I don't hang around. I've got things to do, and I have no trouble dialing into things because I've already got dopamine in the system, which is one of the 5 neurotransmitters for flow, right? Now, there's lots of other benefits in terms of the your immune system, blah, blah, blah. But that's another conversation. But I would recommend people take on things that are difficult, hard things, just to train you to take on hard things.
And you could start, rather than plunging into a pool of ice water, you could start with a cold shower. I've done that.
If you want a protocol, I'll give you a protocol that you can use. Start warm for about, I don't know, I'd say for 5 or 6 days, maybe a week's worth of showers, drop it down at the end for 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And then back to warm so you get out feeling okay. Yeah. Just test it, taste it. Right? It'll take your breath away.
Yeah.
Right, that's the natural response. And then you've got to manage your breathing. So try to get long exhales, 2 or 3 long exhales, and you will very quickly start to adapt. You will surprise yourself. So just for 4 or 5 days, let's say, 15 seconds. So you're just injecting it in the middle of a shower. And then put it to go to 30 seconds. You don't need to go more than a minute, really. What the science tends to say is once you've equalized your breathing and you've adapted, because you will get this adaptation where you'll go, actually, it doesn't feel cold anymore. You've done your work.
I noticed that, actually. I noticed that particularly on the back, where it feels really, really cold to start with, it almost starts to feel slightly warm. It's a kind of weird sensation.
And I'll just to kind of reiterate how normal this is. Right? If we were on holiday and someone jumps in the pool and it's cold, all right, and you go, what's it like? And they go, it's okay once you're in.
Yeah, exactly.
Within a few seconds, it's okay once you're in.
Yeah.
We've all done that.
Yeah.
You're just doing that on purpose.
Yeah.
The fact that you're doing it on purpose, consciously choosing to be uncomfortable, just for a short period of time. And you're right, listen, dosage is important. You don't want to go jumping in an ice pool for 10 minutes. You're going to hypothermia, right?
Yeah.
These are short bursts of stress that you then quickly recover from. That's the system that you're building. So 15 seconds for a few days, 30 seconds, build it up gradually over maybe 3 or 4 weeks. You can then put a minute in. If you did it, if you just do it 3 or 4 times a week, right? I won't go into the specifics of how long you need to do it because it's personal, it's each to their own. You want it to be cold enough that it's cold that you want to get out, but not too cold that it kills you, right? So you've got to be the gauge of that temperature. And you want to be in as long as you can to get your breathing to equalize. But again, it may take a few weeks to adapt. It's a weird one to talk about, Martin, because in a corporate setting, I don't want to talk about people's shower habits.
No.
Right? It's the same with breathing and breath work. We've been breathing a long time. I got my 10,000 hours on breathing. And I go, but when you go looking, there's a whole world of opportunity to understand your nervous system and stress management and, acclimatizing to stressful situations and these slightly niche activities like cold water. And look, check out Wim Hof. Wim Hof's got he's got good data. He's science-led. He's got great protocols. His apps don't even cost anything. You can go and do a lot worse than checking him out.
But the interesting thing about these things you're talking about, these are not big events you do every now and then. These are things you do every day.
These are rituals.
That is significant.
Supplements.
It's absolutely
keep that same metaphor going. The cold shower to me is like taking a few supplements. I do it. It's minutes. It's done. I'm on with my day.
Yeah.
And it's a pattern of behaviour like brushing my teeth. I see it as a ritual. I love this concept we hear a lot in the corporate sector around win the morning. Or I hear it on podcasts quite. Got to win them. How do you win the morning? Well, you win the morning with just 2 or 3 little things that you always do.
Yeah.
And they haven't got to be seismic. It's not like you're doing something once a month to prove something to yourself.
Yeah.
You can do that. You know, with the fastest growing sport in the last 10 years are things like Tough Mudder.
As our friend Colin says, small and easy gets done, you know.
Yeah, it does.
Fun and easy gets done.
I like challenges and big challenges. And like I said, Tough Mudder, Spartan Trail, these big action adventure events, 2-year triathlon, that's a challenge, and you'll come out of it with a lot of, you know, observations about yourself. But for ongoing performance, it's the daily disciplines that make the difference. And
also, we're also talking about here, you know, taking that combination of well-being and performance, we're also talking about health span. Yeah. And, you know, I am coming into my 62nd year. I believe you all might be coming into your 60 next year.
I am 60 next year, yeah.
Is that right?
60 in August.
There you go. So next August, that's right.
Next August,
yes, exactly, yeah. So, yeah, it does make you focus a lot more on your habits and where they're taking you. And I'd say to anybody listening to this, get into these habits early. Yeah. Because it's a bit like the whole concept of money, you know, and accumulating money, the kind of cumulative impact of money, you know, the whole thing with rice, a grain of rice on a chessboard and how it doubles. So the exponential impact you get from doing things on a daily basis. Yeah. You know, the old analogy of it's not 10 apples in 10 days' time. It's an apple a day that keeps the doctor away. So I've noticed it in myself. I noticed this year. I got into the habit of stretching. I had problems with my neck and my shoulder. Both have some issues there. Yeah. But I found that if I get into the habit of doing it daily, it is a game changer.
Yeah, I got a nice idea for habits, which people can test, right? Yeah. Especially, look, this is a good time of year for this conversation, right? Millions of people, a matter of weeks ago, made a decision. And this year,
part of the year.
And this year they meant it, by the way. They meant it. This year, I'm going to get fit. Whatever the resolution was.
And they wrote that out on the 1st of January.
Oh, and they told everyone. They were this year is different, right? Yeah. And you know, what were the gyms like that first week in January? You couldn't get a machine at 7 a.m, right? Now, you know, you go back, I don't know, mid to late Feb. Check out how busy the gyms are late Feb. And the data backs that up, right? A lot of studies I was looking at around momentum, say it again, around momentum. And 3 of them were just on New Year resolutions. And it was saying they all agreed that by the end of Feb, into the end of the first quarter, 85% of people will have dispatched their resolution. Now, I know that, you know, your listeners will be the 15%, and it's the others that won't follow through. But there's a reason for that. So I got a great little hack, and it's in the book. I talk about this, about how you can form habits by using brain chemistry as well as motivation, right? So, you know, we all know the pain-pleasure principle. So you want to...
Motivation could be quite unreliable, let's be honest.
It can be, yeah. So if you want to just go motive, be clear about why you're doing it and what's the consequence if you don't. So get driven by the pain if you don't get it, the pleasure if you do. And then if you want to add some value to it, I would suggest try this hack. And the hack is, whatever your duration of time is, let's say 21 days is a popular term, 21 days to form a habit. I don't know whether that's really accurate, doesn't matter. But let's say it's a 21-day challenge. My recommendation, what I've tested when I was doing the triathlon, I wrote down 5 behaviors that I wanted to become more regular, right? So... And they were, some of them were interconnected. It could be regular exercise, daily exercise. It could be cold shower. It could be drink a green smoothie, right? You know, it could be stretching. So there's these 5 things, and they haven't got to be. They can be work related. There's these 5 disciplines that I want to become normal, that I don't have to put on a list anymore.
You don't have to think about.
It's habitual. It's habitual. That's the point.
It is what you do.
Yeah. And so the model that I use, and I did again check some good data on this. This is a 21-day challenge, but it's not a 21-day challenge. This is 7 3-day challenges. So it's a 3-day challenge. So for the next 3 days, I'm going to focus on these. And I write these 5 things down, and there'll be a little box alongside them for the next 3 days. And each day, I'll then tick whether I did these 5 things.
Very good.
Now, after 3 days, you might go, actually, on the second day, I only did 2 of them. I didn't do all 3. Now, if that was a 21-day challenge, I'm going to start feeling like I'm losing. Like I've screwed up, I've failed. I knew I couldn't trust myself. I start beating myself up. No, with this process, I'm factoring in human fallibility. I'm factoring in it's okay to be human, right? You're trying to build new patterns here.
Frailties of the mind.
Right? So you go, right, for 3 days, you make a note. Did I do all 5? Right? Yes, yes, no. So now what you do, no matter what, yes, yes, yes. Park it. Now you got another 3-day challenge. And you go again for these 5 things. And then you assess, how did you get on? Yes, 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 no, no. Didn't do those 2. Okay, next 3 days, go again. Now, if during this process you're going, I haven't done that one ever across the last 9 days, it's never happened. You've got to ask the other question, is this something that you want on the list? Why is it there? At least give that some consideration. We go, no, it should be on there. Should be. Okay, well, I'm saying it must be on there. If you see it as 7 3-day challenges, by the end of the 21 days, these 7-day blocks of time, my observation, I found this work brilliantly, and I've tested with many clients since, 4 or 5 out of the 5, maybe 3 sometimes, you haven't got to think about it again. Maybe for the next 21 days, 2 of them are still on your list. So you can go and you can run it again. Within 21 days of just monitoring these chunks of 3 days, you just get to the point where the habit formation forms, right? But what I'm factoring in is I'm taking away disappointment. You're allowed to fail to make this work, right? If it's like I want to go to the gym for the next month, 3 times a week, and after the first 2 weeks you've been once, what happens? You quit, you bail, you failed. I'm going, no, just restart the next 3 days, go again. You build in that ability to regroup, reset, and go again. By the last 2 3-day blocks, they're all happening. It's all happening. Yeah, it's a good model.
And actually, so you visually are writing this down.
I get on a bit of paper, write the behaviours down, and as you check, as these 21 days in 7 3-day chunks. Yeah. Whoops, and you just tick them as you go. Yeah. So you can see it in front of you.
Yeah, no, I really love this idea. I've been in a similar thing myself where I'm encouraging people to do this. So there's something about the visual aspect here. Yeah. You're actually seeing, you've written it down, you've been intentional about it, then you're scoring yourself against it. Yeah. Then you get that kind of streak mentality going. Yeah. And the motivation is building from within because you want to continue to do it.
Yeah, that definitely helps. Streak mentality. But if you do miss a day, don't write it off. Yeah. Start again. Yeah. Wait till the next 3-day chunk and go again.
Yeah, no, I like that.
Out of the 5, by the end of it, if you've got 3 habits, the other 2, all right, one meant to happen. Yeah. That's a result.
Yeah, no, that's great. Fantastic. Yeah. This has been amazing. It's definitely a long form podcast for sure.
Long form podcast. Turned into one.
That's what it would be. Yeah. 2 speakers, expressive speakers together. Yeah. Never going to be short. No. But fantastic. Absolutely amazing. I mean, really, we talked about practical ideas that people can go and use. Backed up with a bit of theory and science behind it. My wish for people listening to this is that you, even if you apply it, a quarter of what we've been talking about here. And I can vouch for the fact, having known Jim for 30 odd years, that you are in great shape and you're of good health.
Thank you very much.
I can vouch for that.
Well, I've got another triathlon coming up, so I better be.
Exactly, yeah. So it's been great chatting with you. We get the chance to speak a lot, but actually to be able to
that's great.
Do it in a slightly more structured way here for our audience, I really appreciate you coming over. So any last thoughts you would leave you? I would highly recommend this fantastic book, very practical, as we said. If people want to get hold of you, get hold of the book, etc.
You can get the book on Amazon. Yeah, it's easy. You can drop me a line at my website, jimsteele.com. Drop me an email. Happy to have a conversation with you. Share some ideas. I think one thing I'd leave you with, one metaphor or an analogy as you are looking into the rest of 2024. It's this concept of how you frame all of your goals. And I love this. I came across this while I was writing the book. This idea of using the word adventure. Right? It's a simple reframe, right? When I mentioned the fastest growing sports are things like Tough Mudder and these adventure activities.
Adrenaline type activities.
They call them adventure activities for a reason. Psychologists love that term because the word adventure encapsulates everything. It's not predicated by success or failure, positive or negative. Adventures can be exciting, they can be dangerous. They can be the unknown, risk, right? Adrenaline, it can be challenge. It covers everything. But when you think about time ahead, and if you look to the next 12 months, I don't know what's going to happen in the world. Life's challenging. There's lots going on, right? But if you go, do you know what? It's going to be an adventure. It feels better. It just feels better. And maybe it's not about saying it out loud, but inside your head, when you frame your goal stack of your direction of travel, your mission critical goals, your daily activities, when you frame them under this is the adventure that is your life, it just puts you in it triggers dopamine, that word. It already puts you on the, you lean in. You lean in. So I'd leave you with that.
Yeah, fantastic. Excellent.
All right.
May your life be an adventure and continue to be an adventure, and may we continue on this little adventure together as well.
Yes.
So yeah, a lovely phrase there. Fantastic. Love that.
All right.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much too. Good
Cheers.